is very important in the sense it gives you a quick clue to identify whether child has got an upper airway obstruction or a lower airway obstruction. If there is a stridor, that is inspiratory crowing sound is there, you have to suspect possibility of an upper airway obstruction. Upper airway obstruction may be a simple benign condition or it could be a serious condition like foreign body or a laryngeal edema, right? So that is the thing. So the various conditions which you come across in this include, one is acute epiglottitis. This may be relevant to your ENT also. Sometimes there may be laryngitis. And another important medical condition is laryngotracheobronchitis, which is often viral, caused by paramyxovirus and myxoviruses. And there is another entity called spasmodic laryngitis. We'll go one by one. Next slide. Can I go to next slide? So you come across the epiglottitis. Epiglottitis means, as you know, it is something like a lid that covers the larynx or the voice box. So this gets swollen and inflamed, usually the causative organism being Haemophilus influenza B. So the supraglottis includes above the level of glottis, you come across epiglottitis, and usually there is associated involvement of hypopharynx also. That is why there is a hypopharyngitis. And the commonest pathogen that was there before is Haemophilus influenza B. So it is a bacterial pathogen that used to affect in the children age group between 2 months to 2 years more often. In neonates, the spectrum is different, but usually in the post-neonatal period, usually the common causative pathogen is Hib. But with the advent of immunization, especially now the Hib vaccine is available, it is given in the form of Penta 5. So therefore, the Hib is now coming down. So epiglottitis also has come down less. But still, sometimes it may be of theoretical importance. That is why I'm telling about this epiglottitis. And it may be important for you in your ENT also. Apart from that, the other organisms like pneumococcus and also beta hemolytic streptococcus and staphylococcus also can be the causative agents. And usually it starts like a minor illness, something like a running nose or something. But actually it progresses very fast. Within few hours it progresses. Once there is epiglottic involvement, usually the child will have high fever. Usually they will have a difficulty in swallowing. I told you there will be associated hypopharyngitis. Naturally there will be dysphagia also. So painful dysphagia. That is also called, what is that called? Painful dysphagia, vodinophagia. So therefore, usually the child will have a difficulty in swallowing. Along with that, there will be a noisy breathing. So noisy breathing is very typical. A good pediatrician or a good clinician is one who just listens to the sound and tries to identify what could be the most probable condition the child is suffering from. Suppose he comes across a child, a small young infant or a small toddler, who comes across with the inspiratory crowing sound, he has to suspect some problem with upper airway. So therefore, that may be the only sign at times. Suppose the foreign body is there, the only physical finding with which the child may be brought to the outpatient facility may be in the form of a stridor. A sudden onset of a stridor, especially in the children 1 to 3 years, toddlers age group, you have to suspect foreign body. That is a differential. But here we are talking about epiglottitis, where there is inflammation of the epiglottis. There also you come across stridor. So a stridor will be there. And more noisy breathing, but usually it is much softer than laryngotracheobronchitis. Stridor is more striking in LTB. LTB means laryngotracheobronchitis. That is a much commoner condition. Usually due to viral infection, there is a diffuse involvement of the whole of the airway, mainly involving the upper airways. Therefore, that is also accompanied by stridor, but that it is more hoarse and more noisy. So laryngotracheobronchitis, usually child will have more noisy breathing. It will be alarming to the parents. Actually, it is not that serious a condition. Why? Because I am saying because it is less likely to become life-threatening. But it's not so with epiglottitis, which can be sometimes life-threatening also. Okay. So most of the times, the child will not be able to phonate because there is a laryngeal involvement. He cannot phonate, and he will keep his neck extended so that he can feel better relief with epiglottitis. And usually, because he has got hypopharyngitis, he will not be able to swallow the saliva also. Therefore, saliva starts dribbling from the corner of the mouth. That's what. And it also, he usually keeps the chin thrust forward so that it increases the airway space. So therefore, all these things you come across in a child with epiglottitis. These are all adaptive mechanisms on the part of the child because there is a severe inflammation involving the epiglottis along with hypopharynx. So what happens is, because it is an upper airway obstruction, one of the most important things you come across in these children is presence of suprasternal and subpostural retraction. Most importantly, suprasternal retraction. You must remember, whenever there is an upper airway obstruction, child will have suprasternal and supraclavicular retractions. That point you have to remember. Because it's an emergency. Whenever the child has got a stridor, immediately you have to look for retractions also. If they were to be there in the suprasternal space and supraclavicular space, you have to suspect upper airway obstruction. Okay. So as the child is fatigued, actually the stridor, because he is not making voluntary effort to take a deep breath, naturally the stridor also diminishes in its intensity. But the child's condition actually will be deteriorating. Next slide. Next slide. Ramesh Reddy garu, next slide. Any problem? Ramesh Reddy garu, next slide. So for this, the treatment would be keep the patient to hospitalization. There will be humidified oxygen by hood you should give, and watch for the respiratory failure, because suddenly the patient may go into a state of respiratory failure because he may get fatigue. And as cyanosis may be, most of the times if cyanosis is there, that also may be masked if the oxygen is being given. Should not give any sedative to these baby. Oxygen is actually the best sedative. No other sedative should be given, because the sedative is given, the voluntary effort will be missing, and child will deteriorate in its clinical condition. So because the child cannot take anything orally, it needs to be hydrated. Hydrated is parental given by the parental form in the form of IV fluids. Apart from that, because it's caused by bacterial pathogen like Hib, Haemophilus influenza B, you have to give an antibiotic like cefotaxime or ceftriaxone. You have to give 100 milligrams per kg per day in divided doses, preferably IV route, because you want immediate action. Try to give it by IV. And apart from that, actually this condition is deteriorating. Preferably by a specialist, should be done either intratracheal intubation or tracheostomy also. That should be rarely be needed. But if you want to check the airway, you must be very careful, because suddenly your examination of the upper airway itself may induce a laryngeal edema. Next slide. Next, coming to the laryngotracheobronchitis. This is a very common condition we come across in pediatric practice, especially during winter months. Usually children age group of 1 to 3 years, they suffer from this. This is also called infectious group. That means there is a non-infectious group. Non-infectious group, for example, if you take a foreign body also, the child can have. Similarly, there can be group due to other causes, where there is a brassy cough because of other causes. But here it comes under infectious group, and usually it's caused by viral infections like parainfluenza type 1. Okay. So the other agents which can cause is respiratory syncytial virus, influenza virus, and adenovirus. These are the things which also sometimes can cause. These are all the respiratory pathogens. Usually, remember, most of the respiratory infections in children, majority, 90% are constituted by the virus. Most of them are self-limited. They last for about 3 to 5 days, most of the times. And most of them will not require any antimicrobials. You remember all this. So viral infections are extremely common in children. That doesn't mean you should keep mum. But you should not aggressively treat with every respiratory infection with antimicrobials, because it will cause drug resistance. So therefore, you remember viral infections are extremely common, and most of them are self-limited. They last for about 3 to 5 days. And out of them, this LTP also comes into that spectrum. And onset here is gradual. It all starts something like a mild cold. Afterwards, gradually the infection extends down the airway. So therefore, the child starts, once the larynx is involved, child will have mild brassy cough, because of which we call it a croup syndrome. And along with that, I told you, inspiratory stridor will be there, a crowing sound, and it increases with, as the obstruction becomes more and more, the stridor also increases. So whenever there is an upper airway obstruction partially, then you come across this stridor. Along with that, I told you the most important thing is you have to look for suprasternal and sternal retractions. If these things are there, child is having a respiratory compromise. He may require a respiratory support. Sometimes he may require simply hydration and oxygenation. Sometimes he may require respiratory support also. So the child condition is deteriorating. So all these things can be made out by clinical assessment of recording the sound the child is producing. That is one, the stridor. Second one is the retraction. Of course, we look at the general condition of the child. Child is dull or hypoxic and irritable, or is delirious. All these things you can make out. You have to look for the sensorium of the child, how the child is looking. Suppose initially child, because of hypoxia, will be restless. Afterwards, as the time passes by, the condition becomes more and more serious. The child becomes dull, and he may become blue also. So initially he will be restless and anxious. So decrease in the breath sounds and stridor may signify usually an impending. I told you, when the child is deteriorating in its clinical condition, as the voluntary effort becomes much less and less, what happens is the stridor also diminishes. Respiratory effort will be poor. Child will be drowsy, and the condition is actually bad. You should not think because there is absence of stridor, child's condition is improving. Actually, it is deteriorating. So what is more important is you have to look for all the vitals and also the sensorium and look at the child's condition. And just because the stridor has given, don't think child has made an improvement. It could be a deterioration. That point you have to remember. Next slide. Am I audible? Hello? Students, are you with me?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. Next slide. Ramesh Shetty garu, next slide. So the treatment. So you can see the general appearance, stridor. And then if the stridor is there, oxygen saturation, other things, respiratory distress. What is the respiratory rate? What are the retractions? What is the color of the child? These things you have to observe. Along with that, what is the sensorium? Child is alert, or is it irritable, or is it delirious, or is it drowsy, stuporous, or comatose? These things you have to make a note. It's because the sensorium is very important in a child who is hypoxic. So the mild cases you come across, you have to give only symptomatic treatment. Most of the cases they require only symptomatic treatment. So for fever, you give antipyretics, and encourage more and more oral fluids, because if the child is dehydrated, what happens is the respiratory secretions, they become more thick. Child will not be able to bring them out. So therefore, you have to hydrate the child well. The child is not in a position to take anything orally or to give intravenous fluids. Ask the parents to report. So most of the times, intravenous hydration should be attempted only in an inpatient care facility. When the child is at home, you must ask the parents to give more fluids liberally to the child. That is what you need to do. Suppose child is moderately severe, that means respiratory distress is increasing, retractions are more and more, child is becoming irritable, and stridor is there even at rest. Then if there is an increased respiratory rate, what we call tachypnea is there, that indicates usually moderately severe illness. Next, that requires hospitalization. Next slide. So the moderate illness requires hospitalization. Next slide. Next slide. So once patient is hospitalized, he may require nebulized epinephrine, which is available in the strength of 1 in 1,000 strength. So that you give 0.1 to 0.1 ml to 0.5 ml per kg, maximum 5 ml for immediately. So this epinephrine you give in the form of aerosol form, nebulizer form. So that you have to give. Along with that, that naturally decreases the edema of the airway, because it is epinephrine, which will reduce the edema. It improves the airflow, and repeat if necessary every 2 to 4 hours. Another agent which is of use in these conditions include the steroids like dexamethasone, 0.3 to 0.6 milligrams IM single dose, reduces the need for intubation and hospitalization. The child tends to be more serious condition, may require what we call intubation and other things. These can be averted by giving a suitable dose of dexamethasone, such that most of the time these children will not require additional respiratory support. Suppose the severe proof is there, patient is restless, agitated, marked tachypneic with retractions, cyanosis, we need ICU with oxygen and short-term ventilation. Then you have to give, sometimes ventilation also may be, artificial ventilation may be needed. Next slide. Spasmodic group. This is another entity that is often we come across in the 1 to 3 years age group. There is no running nose or anything. Preceding coryza is not there in this, unlike in laryngotracheobronchitis. Usually, child wakes up early in the morning with a brassy cough and noisy breathing. Just improves in few hours, and sometimes it may recur also. It is a benign course. Remember, it's not a serious condition. Most of the times, it subsides on its own without any treatment. Patient will make a complete recovery. At the most, sometimes patient may require humidification of inspired air. Suppose you can keep some boiling kettle or something in the room, the child is sleeping, that humidifies the air child is inhaling, that will relieve the spasmodic group. So this is a very common complaint, especially winter months, especially brought by the mothers. Suddenly, because child has started coughing late in the night with a brassy cough, the parents also get disturbed and they wake up and they bring the child to the doctor. Most of the time, it is a benign condition. By the time they reach the healthcare facility, the cough will subside. That is the usual picture we come across. This is a very benign condition, spasmodic group. Next slide. So coming to upper airway obstruction, in which the Krupp syndrome is a clinical feature where there is a brassy cough, stridor and retractions and also tachypnea. So there are various differential diagnostic conditions. This may be important for your ENT also. So the common pediatric conditions which are of importance in the case of Krupp syndrome include: number 1 is diphtheria. The child suffers from a vaccine preventable disease. Diphtheria is becoming common. Remember, DPT vaccine is being given from 6 weeks, 10 weeks and 14 weeks. In spite of that, what is the problem with the diphtheria vaccine is for a period of time, the immunity wanes off. So therefore, as the child grows older, the whatever immunity that is being given as primary immunization may not be sufficient, and child may acquire diphtheria even school-going age group also. Apart from that, in the non-immunized segment of the population also, they are more prone for diphtheria. Diphtheria tends to affect the airway. It may not alone affect the pharynx, tonsils, and also it may involve the airway also. So therefore, various post-diphtheritic complications also probably would have read in your ENT like neurologic, cardiovascular, renal, and other complications can occur. And diphtheria, what is the problem is it forms a membrane. The membrane is very much adherent to the mucous surface, and this diphtheritic membrane may involve, usually it involves the tonsils and it may extend onto the palate. And if there is a thick fibrinous exudate and it is firmly adherent, if you remove it leaves behind a bleeding spot. Because membranes can form so many other conditions, but in diphtheria it has got a characteristic feature. The membrane is dark gray in color, it's firmly adherent, and if it is removed, leaves behind bleeding spots, and usually child will have a what we call halitosis or a foul breath. Most of the times, the diphtheritic membrane extends from the tonsils onto the fauces and also onto the soft palate. That is the typical of diphtheritic. It may be unilateral or it may be bilateral. It may involve the larynx also. If it involves the larynx and forms a membrane there, that is very much dangerous because the child can present himself. Here, the toxemia is profound. Child is, while the temperature is not much, say around 100 or 100 degree Fahrenheit may be there, but child will be profoundly toxic. That point you have to remember. One of the characteristic clinical features is child will have a sickly appearance. He has got a pinched face. He looks very toxic. The temperature is not much, at the same time, child is very toxic. So this stands in contrast to streptococcal tonsillar infection or streptococcal infection, with the fever is very high, child is not that toxic. So that is the differentiation between diphtheria and also which is streptococcal infection. Apart from that, there are other viral exanthematous which can be prevented by immunization, especially in children. Of course, many children are not still getting immunized with this. One among them, the notorious among them is the measles. Measles also can cause, because it involves upper airway as well as the lower airway, especially the tracheobronchial tree gets affected in case of measles, and it may produce stridor as well as wheeze also. Okay. Apart from that, there can be angioedema. Angioedema is due to allergic edema of the larynx. Suddenly, the child may develop stridor. So just like a foreign body, the history will be there. And recurrently, it can be a recurrent feature also, especially defects in the complement. So complement, suppose if there is a autocatalytic breakdown of C3, it itself may induce angioedema. That is another important thing. Apart from that, there can be retropharyngeal abscess. Retropharyngeal abscess can be acute or chronic. Acute retropharyngeal abscess is usually bacterial origin. Usually it is one side. That means the pharyngeal raphe is there, where which the pharynx is attached to the spine. It may appear on either side of the raphe, not on bilateral. Usually it is due to infection of the retropharyngeal lymph nodes, which get separated and form pus. So this retropharyngeal abscess tends to produce a bulge in the posterior pharyngeal wall, which can be palpated by means of your finger, with the help of your finger. And sometimes it can be seen when you do a direct examination of the pharynx also. So this is the one thing, child will be very toxic and there will be difficulty in swallowing. Chronic retropharyngeal abscess is, of course, will not produce usually a stridor. That is seen usually in the case of tuberculosis. So when the tuberculosis is there, this because usually it is secondary to the bone involvement, cervical spine producing a chronic retropharyngeal abscess. Sometimes it may be due to tuberculosis of the retropharyngeal nodes also. Usually it tends to cross the midline. It will, just like tuberculosis, the acute signs of inflammation will be absent in that condition. Usually if you take a cervical spine, it will confirm the diagnosis. That is about the retropharyngeal abscess. Then coming to the aspiration of the foreign body, this is a very important condition. All of you, please remember. In pediatric, tomorrow you may be an adult specialist, you may go for a super specialty or something, blah, blah, blah. But if a child patient comes in the age group of 1 to 3 years and he presents himself with a sudden onset of stridor when he was playful before all the way as per the history of the mother, one of the most important conditions you have to remember is the foreign body. Foreign body is very, very troublesome. It is an accident which needs to be prevented by not allowing the child to have an access for small objects like peas, buttons, and other things. But inadvertently, child may inhale or ingest or insert foreign body. That is the problem with children. Children, they tend to inhale, or sometimes they may ingest, or they may insert foreign body into the ear canal, or sometimes into the anus. Like that, so many things can happen. What is most dangerous is inhalation of the foreign body, because if the foreign body enters into the airway, because I told you the airways are already narrow, they can cause serious respiratory issues, especially in children. Sometimes this, another point you have to remember, in not all cases you come across history of foreign body aspiration. Sometimes the child may come late. The acute episode is forgotten both by the child as well as by the mother. Most of the times it is not noticed by the mother, child is not aware, but at a later stage he may come to the clinical practice with some bronchiectasis or something, because the foreign body has gone down the airway and causes chronic respiratory morbidity. So such things are also common. If you do a bronchoscopy, you may come across a foreign body. Okay, so therefore, one of the most important things, especially in the 1 to 3 year age group, you have to remember sudden onset of respiratory distress accompanied by retractions and stridor. You have to suspect foreign body. Apart from that, another important thing is asthma. Asthma, usually you come across not as stridor, but you come across more often. It tends to involve the lower airways. Therefore, child presents itself with a respiratory distress. There may be subcostal and intercostal retractions involving the lower chest. More often, the child will have wheeze, not stridor. And there will be recurrent episodes and family history of atopic allergy will be present. Right. Next slide. Amish Reddy garu, next slide. So coming back to the most important conditions, the pneumonias. These are very, very important, especially in pediatric practice. I told you it's nearly responsible for 15 to 50% of under 5 mortality in children. The most common lower respiratory infection is pneumonia. So these are unfortunately nowadays, the more vaccines are available, but they are not still common man friendly because the cost is prohibitive yet. So therefore, it is not widely available for universal immunization, so that it can be incorporated in the national immunization schedule. But vaccines are available in office practice. They are costly, especially pneumococcal vaccine is there. Now the hip vaccine is being introduced into the national program because it is now made available along the form of Penta 5. But for pneumonia, the vaccine is available in office practice, but is yet to be introduced large scale across the country. So the pneumonias, the lobar, it could be depending upon the localization of the lesion, where the consolidation happens, whether it involves the lobe or a lobular segment or a bronchopneumonia or interstitial, you have to suspect pneumonias. So pathologically, it is actually the consolidation. Consolidation means you will come across, if you radiologically, filling of the airspace. So that is a characteristic feature. And along with that, there will be infiltration of the interstitial tissue with inflammatory cells. Next slide. You can see the film here. Just now I have already shown at the beginning. So the consolidation is seen. So consolidation is classically in the scene of form of opacity involving the right hemithorax, usually the mid and the lower zones. You could not see the right border of the heart as well as right dome of the diaphragm. That is called silhouetteous sign. We'll go to silhouetteous sign that was described as Felsen. But that is the classic feature, radiologically speaking, in the case of consolidation. So usually lower lobe pneumonias are seen characteristically in pneumococcal pneumonias. Okay. So type of the pathogen also can be to some extent made out both clinically and radiologically depending upon the distinctive features they will have. But in general, you must remember the lower lobe pneumonias are more often the pathogen is pneumococcal pneumonia, usually seen in older children. But upper lobe pneumonias can be due to so many causes. They could be due to tuberculosis, they could be due to Klebsiella, they could be due to Staphylococcus and others. Okay, next slide. Next slide. So if you look at etiology, nearly 40% are again viral. There may be respiratory syncytial virus, influenza virus, para-influenza virus, and adenovirus, which are common agents. Now COVID also is causing pneumonia like picture. So therefore various pneumonias are there. But in children, luckily the COVID is not serious. Nearly 99% of the times the infection is asymptomatic. Children will not suffer much with COVID, unlike in adults. Because the main blessing for children is they don't have ACE2 receptors, which are the main receptors for which this virus will attach. They are not there in children. Therefore, they have got a biological protection, I can say, as far as COVID is concerned. Though in about 1% of the case, they can have problems. So that is about viral. Usually in children, if you come across COVID also, you come across in older children whom there are sufficient number of ACE2 receptors. But you don't come across in under 5 children. But what I am talking to now is about mainly about under 5 children in which the bacterial and viral pneumonias are more common. So bacteria, nearly 66% common bacteria cause the pneumonias. So first 2 months of age, you remember, first 2 months, neonatal period is an exception. Usually, the pneumonia is caused first 2 months by gram-negative pathogens. You may be wondering why this. Therefore, as the baby is born, a newborn is more liable to have a gram-negative pneumonia. That point to remember, right? They also can have gram-positive pneumonias with staph and others if the caregivers are harboring they are the carriers for staphylococcal infection. But usually, they are infections in the case of early neonatal period is caused by gram-negative pathogens. That point you have to remember. Okay. So pathogens, Klebsiella, E. coli. So you know the various gram-negative pathogens. You are all masters of microbiology. E. coli, Proteus, Pseudomonas, Klebsiella, all these come under gram-negative pathogens. So the gram-positive pathogens are staph and other things. From 3 months onwards, the most vulnerable age group, they tend to develop all these infections like Streptococcus pneumonia, Hib, and also Staphylococcus. So these are the common agents, 3 months to 3 years. Out of this, remember, for Hib there is a vaccine now. For pneumococcus there is a vaccine now. Now though not really available, there is an effective vaccine. But there is staphylococcal, yet there is no vaccine. So therefore, staphylococcal, the prevention needs special care. We'll go to next slide. So after 3 years, the common pathogens, I told you, older children, you come across pneumococcal pneumonia, usually tends to have predilection for the lower lobes. Usually in the winter months, you come across, that is one thing. Another common pathogen you come across is Staphylococcus aureus. Staphylococcus aureus is another important you come across in older children. Suppose why this happens, because Staphylococcus, suppose child develops some osteomyelitis or some other infection or a pyelonephritis, then a metastatic infection can occur in the lung also. The bloodstream, the Staphylococci can spread. That happens more often with malnutrition and immunocompromised children. So they may have metastatic lung infection and may develop pneumonia. Okay. So you must remember certain sections of the population, child population, are more vulnerable for gram-negative pathogens. Out of them, especially young infants, I told you already, first 2 months, because of genital flora in the mother, this usually is having a gram-negative pathogens. They tend to have severe acute malnutrition. Children who are malnourished, they are also, because they are immunocompromised, their physical, chemical, biological, and immunological barriers are not effective. So therefore, they tend to have usually a gram-negative pathogens. Usually, gram-negative pathogens are more common in them. The reason is because they will have gram-negative sepsis also much commoner. One of the most important sepsis that you come across in children is gram-negative sepsis, especially in children who are malnourished. So that is another. Another is IPH. IPH means immunocompromised pediatric host. That means it is nothing but immunocompromised child. Usually, the commonest cause of immunocompromise in children is acquired, usually due to HIV infection. Of course, HIV is now coming down with less and less number of cases, and also more number of children are being treated now. So they are given supportive care. So though it requires lifelong support, most of the times the picture due to immunocompromised pediatric host due to HIV infection, also the number is also dwindling now. So what is more important is severe acute malnutrition can still occur, especially in children who come from the rural areas in whom the feeding practices are not optimal. So they tend to have these gram-negative infections. So sometimes the infection, pneumonia can be caused by atypical microorganisms, atypical bacteria like chlamydia, mycoplasma, they also can cause. And the infection that is caused by them is called CAP. CAP means community acquired pneumonia. Okay. So therefore, this is community acquired pneumonia. So usually, community means most of the children, they get affected. It's all community acquired pneumonias. Most of the time, the children are not that symptomatic. So there is a mismatch between clinical and radiological picture. Clinically, child will not be having any respiratory distress. He just walks into the OP department. Therefore, that is often called walking pneumonia. Child just walks, usually a older child, aged around 5 to 10 years. He walks into the outpatient department without having symptoms. He will have just cough. On auscultation, may find some fine rails. If you take an X-ray, there will be an extensive consolidation. That is the picture you come across in the case of community-acquired pneumonia, usually due to organisms like chlamydia and mycoplasma. Chlamydia, of course, can cause infection in the newborns also. Remember, pneumonia, word about pneumonia in newborns. Newborns, older children usually with pneumonia tend to have cough as the predominant symptom. And child starts coughing and there is a difficulty in breathing. And child, whenever he coughs, he finds himself uncomfortable because of pleurisy. You think of pneumonia in a older child. But you remember, pneumonia in children, especially newborns, can occur with extensive consolidation radiologically. Also, still the baby will not be having cough. Cough is an unusual symptom in the newborn. So that is the importance of pediatrics as a dynamic specialty. You cannot have same yardstick for all. So newborn presentation is somewhat different. Preschoolers, the different presentation is different. For older children, it's just like an adults. You understand? So it's a dynamic presentation the child will have. So you should have a dynamic approach. You have to keep the age of the child in your mind before you make an assessment. Child comes with a respiratory distress, and if you think there is no cough, how it can be pneumonia? No, such concept will not be there. It will not hold water in the case of a newborn. So newborn will not have cough. Okay, but there are very few exceptions. Newborn also having cough. One among them is chlamydia. Another one is aspiration. So these two conditions, they stand apart from other pneumonias, in that they will have cough as the presenting symptom. Okay, that point you can remember. So chlamydia and aspiration can present as cough in newborn, but usually you remember cough is an unusual symptom in the newborn. Then apart from that, in immunocompromised rows, you may have pneumocystis cerevisiae and histoplasma. All these organisms also can cause immunocompromised pediatric host infection. So apart from that, worm infestation is very common in children. When the ascaris, when the larvae pass through the lungs, they may cause pneumonia-like picture. Sometimes aspiration can occur in any age group. Remember, child throws a seizure and he becomes unconscious. And at the time of there is a pooling of secretions inside the oral cavity. Sometimes they may be aspirated by the unconscious child. So therefore, don't think aspiration means always it occurs in 1 to 3 year age group. Aspiration of foreign body is more common in younger kids. But aspiration of food material, vomitus, and other things can occur in any age group. Post-operative patients, they can have aspiration. Because they did not have had the cough reflex, which is protective, they may aspirate. Similarly, a child who has thrown a seizure can aspirate and may develop aspiration pneumonia. So therefore, like that, various conditions can, so a child has got a palatopharyngeal incompetence, say for example, GB syndrome patient. If he is inadvertently fed orally, he may aspirate. Similarly, the cough reflex is weak due to various causes. Say for example, mediastinal tumor or something, then also the child may aspirate. So in all the conditions wherein the cough reflex is not effective, some food or foreign material may enter the airway and may cause aspiration pneumonia. That point you have to remember, because aspiration is a very important cause that should be prevented, not treated. As far as possible, you must know the setting in which the aspiration can occur and try to prevent them, not treating. Treating means you are becoming wise after the event. Okay. So then apart from that, kerosene poisoning is very common in children. Every day in big hospitals, teaching hospitals like Usmania and other hospitals, if you see, at least 1 to 3 children getting admitted with kerosene. Kerosene is often unfortunately stored in Coca-Cola bottles and other beverage bottles. Children confuse them for beverages and they take it. And once the child smells of kerosene, the mother immediately brings the child to the emergency department. Child will be having respiratory distress. Most of the times, by the time child is already aspirated. So this is also called hydrocarbon pneumonitis. Hydrocarbon pneumonia. We'll go to next slide. Next slide. So the clinical features of pneumonia, if you look at, various risk factors are there which predispose the child for pneumonia. One among them is a low birth weight baby. So preterm or a low birth weight baby is more vulnerable for pneumonia. Severe acute malnutrition, I told you already. Vitamin A deficiency. Vitamin A is also called anti-infective vitamin. It provides the epithelial integrity both for the respiratory as well as gut epithelium. But once vitamin A is deficient, naturally the child is more vulnerable for respiratory infections. So if the baby is not breastfed, then the child is highly vulnerable because the biological factors, the immunological factors that are there in the breast milk is absent. And apart from that, child is often fed with the milk. Milk also is fed by means of what we call mode of feeding will be the form of a bottle, which is highly condemnable article, I can say, in our country. Bottle is a highly condemnable article because even the educated mothers also, majority of them are not aware how to feed with bottle. It's not that simple. And most of the time, children are more vulnerable for aspiration. You must discourage bottle feeding as far as possible. Ask all mothers to feed their own milk. So breastfeeding should be encouraged, and you should never allow and you should never prescribe a bottle to any mother. Sometimes the people try to write on a prescription, they write to purchase one feeding bottle like that. It is a condemnable thing. I can say it's a crime by the doctor to write a feeding bottle as a prescription. So therefore, if the mother wants to feed extra milk to the child, she has to give with a cup and spoon, but not with a bottle. You must remember, children should not, who are breastfed, should never be allowed bottle, because there is the mechanism of feeding is different from breast to bottle. The baby gets confused. That is called nipple confusion. Baby will aspirate. So therefore, the baby is already breastfed, and the mother and you also think that the feeding is not adequate. You have to ask the mother to feed with a cup and spoon, but not with bottle. You remember, all of you. A very important point, because I see many MBBS doctors and others also committing blunders and asking the mothers to start bottle, and she's already feeding with her milk. This is the worst thing one can suggest, right? So therefore, there is a lack of breastfeeding. There is a problem. And passive smoking. Suppose adult smokers are there in the family, children become vulnerable. That is more dangerous than active smoking also, they say. And if there is a large family with overcrowding, there is a risk of droplet infection. And if there is a family history of bronchitis, that also is a problem. Advanced birth order, crowding, overcrowding, and a young age, and air pollution. All these things are there, especially in urban settings. Most of the children are more vulnerable. So most of the times, pneumonia, the onset is insidious, starts with upper respiratory infection. Suddenly, child develops high fever, there is a breathlessness, and he starts grunting. Grunting is something like in your ENT, you would have read about the Valsalva's maneuver. So it's a forcible expression against partially closed glottis. So that is called grunting. Grunting is a very important audible respiratory finding in pediatric practice. Remember, audible sounds in children are very, very important. It may be a stridor, it may be a wheeze, it may be a snore, it may be a grunt, or it may be a rattle. So stridor, I told you already, upper airway partial obstruction. Wheeze is expiratory, usually seen in asthma. And if there is snoring, it is due to upper airway, possibly because of tonsils or adenoids involvement. Usually snoring noise is heard during sleep, especially in obese children. Apart from that, there is another condition, there is an entity called rattle. You would have read in your tracheal pathologies. Rattle means if there is a fluid secretion inside the trachea, it will produce a rattling sound. Usually it happens in a patient who is dying. That is why it's called death rattle. So it is something like a wind passing across what we call a layer of leaves. That leaves behind you are something like a sound. So that is called rattle. So that rattle indicates, usually suppose the patient has undergone tracheostomy. In your ENT, you would have read about tracheostomy when it is done emergently or electively. So there post-operatively, following tracheostomy, post-tracheostomy care is very, very important. That is more important than tracheostomy itself. Because secretion, they tend to get pooled, and if they remain in the airway, the upper airway gets blocked and the fellow will die of hypoxia. So therefore, if the rattling sound is appearing, means usually it is a critical condition, and immediately the secretion should be aspirated by means of gentle suction. It's very, very important. Post-operatively tracheostomy, post-operative care of tracheostomy is most important. All of you remember. So therefore, tomorrow they may ask you in your orals in ENT also. Post-tracheostomy care. So that should be done. If it is not done, then that patient is more prone for. Okay. So grunting I was speaking about. Grunting means forcible expression against partially closed glottis. Something like what we call pig when it is eating food, it grunts. Pig. You would have seen making some sound. So something like a grunting sound. This is what is grunting. So if this finding is there in a small infant, you have to suspect pneumonia. Don't ask, sir, X-ray is not available, sir. Blood test could not be done, sir. Auscultation, I could not make out bronchial breathing, sir. All these things, blah, 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 are applicable in older children. In younger kids, if you come across increased respiratory rate with retractions and grunt, you have to suspect pneumonia, unless proved otherwise. You remember, you take it from me. Tachypnea is the most important finding. Tachypnea is the most important and sensitive finding, and tachypnea is defined based on age-related cutoffs. Suppose if it were to be less than 2 months, more than 60 is tachypnea, 60 breaths per minute. 2 months to 1 year, it is more than 50 is tachypnea. 1 to 5 years, more than 40 is tachypnea, 40 breaths per minute. You understand? You remember simply 60, 50, 40. So less than 2 months, 2 months to 1 year, 1 year to 5 years. Even a community health worker can identify if the child has got a fast breathing, if she has got a wristwatch with her with a second hand, she can identify whether the child is tachypneic or not. The child is having tachypnea, it carries highest degree of sensitivity and specificity in diagnosing pneumonia. Suppose child's respiratory rate is normal, there is a less likelihood of child having a lower respiratory infection like pneumonia. Okay? Nearly 80 to 90% of the children with pneumonia clinically has got sensitivity as well as specificity also. More importantly, sensitivity, nearly 90% sensitivity. So therefore, you have to carefully watch for respiratory. So when a patient gets admitted in pediatric ward, I will insist that my postgraduate resident will tell the respiratory rate every day morning when I go to round. He has to observe for 2 minutes, count the respiratory rate and tell. Why I am emphasizing so much? Because you people, you should not miss a child with a pneumonia in outpatient department. That is the reason I am telling. So you have to count the respiratory rate before you say everything is normal. Okay? So that point you have to remember. So tachypnea will be there. There will be stridor. There will be grunting also will be there. Okay? In case of young infants, what happens is, suppose lower lobe pneumonia is there, the child will have distended abdomen. This distended abdomen looks like as if it is a surgical condition. Remember, usually, suppose the abdomen is distended, the cause can be infradiaphragmatic or it could be supradiaphragmatic. If it were to be supradiaphragmatic, it could be a lower lobe pneumonia. Okay? It can present as an acute abdominal emergency. And in apical pneumonias, what happens is, usually there will be neck stiffness also. Clinically, child may have meningeal signs like neck stiffness or neck rigidity, because in apical pneumonias, that is a feature. So therefore, these are called red herrings in medicine. So they may divert the attention of the clinician from the basic problem. Actually, the child is having a respiratory problem. Because the abdomen is distended, you think there is something wrong with the tummy. Similarly, the child has got an necrosis, you think child has got a meningitis, but actually it is an apical pneumonia. You understand? So these are called red herrings. Apart from that, there will be flaring of Allen and there will be retraction of the lower chest and signs of consolidation. Signs of consolidation will be taught in your clinical practice. Child will have a bronchial breathing. So bronchial breathing don't expect in all cases. Remember, bronchial breathing is seen in established lesions of consolidation, but early consolidation is characterized by fine rales, especially localized rales. Localized rales usually signify something wrong. If there are bilateral rales, you can be more comfortable. For example, bilateral rales you may come across with the laryngotracheal bronchitis also. But if there are localized or asymmetric rales on one particular area, you have to be more careful. Remember, in pediatric pulmonology practice, there are asymmetric findings. There is a localized crepitations, localized bronchial breathing, localized additional sounds like friction sound. You have to be more careful. If they are only on one side, other side they are absent, you have to be more careful. Similarly, there is only one side dullness, other side it is resonant, you have to be more careful. Asymmetric findings are very, very important because in children, you need high index of suspicion. Once you know these things in your mind, you immediately will catch there is something wrong with this child. This child is having a localized bronchial breathing, or he is having a localized creps in the right infrascapular region, or he has got a dullness in particular area, only on the right side, only infrascapular region, then dullness on percussion. That means an asymmetric finding is there. Then you will have some suspicion. Probably this child is having a problem, right? So that is a little about these various findings. So you may come across in this. Next slide. Next slide. So pneumococcal pneumonia is droplet mode, usually in the winter months. Overcrowding will be there. Bacteria multiply in the alveoli, in the inflammatory exudate. Initially lobular, then lobar it becomes. And most remember, pneumococcal pneumonia, there is no necrosis of the tissues. Necrosis happens with the necrotizing pneumonias. Necrotizing pneumonias are staphylococcal, gram-negative, fungal, and other organisms. Okay, but they will not occur with pneumococcal pneumonia. There will be stage of congestion, red hepatization, gray hepatization, resolution. Usually incubation period is very short, 1 to 3 days. Headache, fever, and chills will be there. There will be dry cough and grunt. I told you, grunt will be there. Child will be grunting like a sound that is heard in expiration. So there will be indrawing of the chest. And their mother says the child is not accepting feeds. One important question you have to ask all the mothers, especially in younger kids, is what about feeding? Child is accepting feeds or refusing feeds or finding it difficult to take the feeds. All these things you have to take from the mother. Sometimes child is reluctant to take feeds because child is anorectic. Child has no appetite. Sometimes child may find it difficult to take the feeds. So therefore you have to carefully differentiate from the mother whether child wants to take a feed, still finding it difficult to take a feed, or is not interested in it. That also is important. Okay. So anorexia can be due to so many causes. Infective hepatitis also child will have anorexia. Right? The other day I was telling about infective hepatitis. There the child will have anorexia. That is different. But here the child will find sometimes difficulty in swallowing also. Okay. And if you see impaired percussion node will be there. If you do a percussion, there will be a dull node, usually asymmetric on one side, and crepitations also may be there asymmetrically. And sometimes if you carefully auscultate, you may come across a tubular type of bronchial breathing. So in such children, you may come across the sound may be very nearer to the ears like bronchophony, or sometimes the child is whispering. Older child, you can ask him to whisper. Say very something like a whisper, he can say 1, 1, 2, 2 like that. You can hear to that. That also will be nicely heard with your stethoscope, and that is called whispering pictorial. Child with apical pneumonia will have a meningismus. Meningismus or meningeal signs. Actually, if you do a lumbar puncture, CSF will be normal. Next slide. Next slide. So diagnosis essentially is based on history. You must ask the mother history, how it has started as upper respiratory infection, then later on child became more sick, becomes febrile, chills and rigors, and there will be cough with difficulty in breathing. Retractions will be there. If you auscultate, you may come across a bronchial breathing. X-ray findings sometimes may be there, and you should not be waiting for X-ray in every case. Suppose you are posted tomorrow in a primary health center, X-ray may not be there. Still, you can make a diagnosis based on if you are very much confident about your history and physical findings. What is more important is you have to look for leukocytosis, and then the sputum also. If sputum is difficult to collect in children, older children you can collect the sputum, and you can do the gram stain, and you can send for culture also, but it's positive in about 5 to 10%. Most of the children they are treated with antibiotics. By the time they come to facility, the culture may be sterile. So patient has to be treated with penicillin or amoxicillin. He has to be treated for about 7 days. If necessary, he has to be given oxygen and IV fluids and also paracetamol. Next slide. Coming to the staph pneumonia. This is a very important condition. All of you have to remember. Infancy and early childhood is more common. Pneumococcal is older children. Staph can occur in younger children. It's a primary. It may involve mainly the lung, or it may be secondary to somewhere sepsis, staphylococcal sepsis somewhere. Suppose the cutaneous sepsis is there, pyoderma is there, or osteomyelitis is there, or pyelonephritis is there. It may spread, involve the lungs, or it may follow measles, exanthematous illness like measles, or sometimes even influenza also. And usually conditions like cystic fibrosis, malnutrition, and diabetes, they predispose the child to have this because they constitute there's a breach of defense mechanisms. These children are more prone for staph pneumonia. So what is more important here in staph pneumonia is there is a bronchoalveolar destruction. It is a necrotizing pneumonia. So therefore there is a damage to the lung. The lung is destroyed. So that is the reason you come across radiologically, you will find X-ray multiple air containing spaces, and these are called pneumatoseals. Pneumatoseals is very important finding in the case of staph pneumonia. Remember, they may occur in other necrotizing pneumonias, but the most important cause, especially in young children, is due to staph pneumonia. So pneumatoseals are air containing spaces which may be seen radiologically. And another important feature of staph pneumonia is it has got a tendency to have a rapid downhill course. It tends to involve the whole of the lung parenchyma very quick, and tends to involve the investment around. That is, pleural sac also gets affected. Child will have an empyema. Empyema means pus in the pleural sac. The child's pleura is infected, and child will have staphylococcal empyema, pus in the pleura. And apart from that, it may involve in the pericardium also. Pericardium is very nearby. If the pleura is affected, naturally the pericardium is also. Therefore, it may produce a pyopericardium. And usually, if you look at, child may have a septic focus on the skin or the nails or somewhere. You may find some other septic focus like osteomyelitis or something. So pyoderma may be there. Usually, sometimes it may be upper respiratory infection also. What is more important, young infants, is it will have a rapid downhill course. What is radiologically, you may come across pneumatoseals, and most importantly, these children, sometimes the lung may rupture into the pleura and may produce a pyoneumothorax. So usually they say in a young infant, if you come across a pyoneumothorax, usually it is due to staphylococcal. So pyopericardium is also another thing. Next slide. So child needs to be hospitalized. He has to be given oxygen, IV fluids, and child has to be given anti-staphylococcal antibiotic like cloxacillin. And you combine with ceftriaxone if there is no response in 48 hours. Anti-staphylococcal, one important drug is vancomycin. Other drugs include teicoplanin or linezolid. And then you have to continue for about 2 weeks if uncomplicated. If child is getting complicated, you may have to treat for about 4 to 6 weeks. Empyema, pneumothorax, they require special interventions. You have to aspirate the empyema. And if there are any complications, various complications like empyema, intercostal drainage, underwater seal drainage with low pressure aspiration should be done. There is a pleural thickening. You have to do decortication to facilitate the lung expansion. Sometimes they do nowadays, most commonly, video assisted thoracoscopic drainage, what we call VATS. VATS means video assisted thoracoscopy. So there you try to do drainage of the pleural space, and you have to do installation of streptokinase to prevent pleural adhesions. You have to do installation of streptokinase into the pleural sac, and if there are metastatic abscesses elsewhere, they have to drain them. Next. Usually staphylococcal empyema is associated with metastatic abscess elsewhere in the body. Say, for example, they may be there in the brain or some other parts of the body also. Right. Next slide. You can see the staph pneumonia here. The right lower zone, there is an air containing space that is called pneumatocele. It is surrounded by a zone of consolidation. So the diaphragmatic outline is also seen. That means possibly it is involving the right mid zone. Probably it may be in the middle lobe. Next slide. You can see here, there is a big radiolucency on the left hemithorax. The whole of the mediastinum is also slightly pushed to the other side, and you can see a dark space in the left hemithorax. It is devoid of any vascular markings. So it may be due to large pneumatocoel, or sometimes it may be a pneumothorax also. Okay. So there is a absence of vascular markings. You have to consider there is either a pneumatocoel or a pneumothorax. Next slide. So here also you can see on the right side, there is the air fluid level, right? Previously. So there is the air fluid level on the right side. That usually with the whole of the mediastinal heart and other things are pushed towards left side. Is a hydropneumothorax on the right side or pyoneumothorax. So pyoneumothorax in young infant usually speaks of staphylococcal etiology. Next. Hibby is another condition you have to remember. It is becoming less common with immunization. 3 months to 3 years. It is an nasopharyngeal infection. There can be bacteria in this Hibby infection. There is no transplacental immunity that usually it provides only early protection. Afterwards, it will not be there. Various complications like pericarditis, empyema, and meningitis can occur. Child should be treated with cefotaxime. And various complications like bacteremia, pericarditis, empyema, all these can occur, but they have become uncommon with immunization. Next. Hibby complications are much less common nowadays with immunization. Nearly 90% reduction in morbidity with immunization. That is the effect of vaccines. Next. Streptococcal pneumonia is usually following a viral exanthem like measles. No. Next slide. So secondly to measles or chickenpox or influenza, it is group B beta hemolytic streptococci in newborns is more common. Usually interstitial pneumonia is more common with streptococci because streptococci cause spreading infections. Streptococci produce an enzyme called hyaluronidase. Therefore, the infection tends to spread across the tissue planes. So therefore, it causes spreading infection. Usually, hemorrhagic infection will be there, and thin purulent effusion also may be there. Serosanguinous, usually abrupt onset with high fever, dyspnea, tachypnea, and Bernstein sputum. And X-ray shows interstitial pneumonia. Treatment is penicillin or amoxicillin. Empyema is there. You have to drain it with intercostal tube. Inhaling intracostal tube, you have to do. Right. Next slide. Next slide. So you can see the streptococcal pneumonia here, usually involving here the lung is also involved, the right upper zone is involved. Remember, this type of upper zone involvement can be there in other infections like Klebsiella as well as tuberculosis. So you can see homogeneous opacity involving the right upper lobe. There is a clear-cut lower right? So that is classic of consolidation. Another important radiological feature of consolidation is air bronchogram. So air acts contrast. So then you can see that. Right. Next. So primary atypical pneumonia, I told you about walking pneumonia, so more common in older children, droplet infection during winter months. Usually the terminal bronchioles are affected, incubation period is about 2 weeks. And you will see maximum radiological changes, but clinically the child is not that symptomatic. So it's also called walking pneumonia. So the diagnosis is by detecting IgM antibody using ELISA technique. So most commonly, atypical pneumonias or mycoplasma infections are treated by means of macrolides, especially newer macrolide infection like azithromycin, what we call clarithromycin. These are the mycins which are employed. Macrolides are used for atypical pneumonias in older children. Chlamydia occurs usually in infants, young infants, even newborns also. I told you, chlamydia is the cause of cough even in newborn. Chlamydia infection in the genital tract of the mother usually causes chlamydiosis involving the conjunctiva as well as the chlamydial pneumonia in the newborn. So that can be the present in future. So the mother has got a genital infection with chlamydia, the baby can present with conjunctivitis and pneumonia. The baby can have cough also. That should be treated with macrolides. Next. Gram negative, this is another important thing, usually seen in debilitated children who are seriously ill and who are otherwise for conditions like severe acute malnutrition, other things. These are the children who will have gram negative pneumonia. E. coli, Klebsiella, and Pseudomonas. Young infants, especially in the newborn and immediately early infancy, first 2 months of life, immunocompromised pediatric course, malnourished children and children with cystic fibrosis, they are more prone for. And usually severe illness will be there. Some of the children who are malnourished may not have severe illness, but if you take an X-ray, there will be extensive consolidation. So evidence of respiratory distress will be there. Radiologically, you may come across consolidation. Klebsiella is another organism that causes necrotizing pneumonia, just like staphylococcal. In immunocompromised pediatric course, you may come across Klebsiella, okay, and you may come across even pneumatocysts also. Child should be treated with ceftriaxone, and if there is a suspicion of a Pseudomonas infection, you have to use antibiotics like anti-Pseudomonas penicillin, ceftazidime or piperacillin or tazobactam. Piperacillin and tazobactam or ceftazidime is the anti-Pseudomonas penicillin. Next. Viral respiratory syncytial virus is the most common. Influenza virus, para-influenza virus, interstitial pneumonia, X-ray, perihilar and peribronchial infection, symptomatic and supportive treatment. There is no specific treatment for viral pneumonias. Mainly symptomatic. If fever is there, paracetamol. Child is not able to take orally, you have to give intravenous fluid. Similarly, the child is hypoxic, you have to give oxygen. Like that, you have to provide them supportive care. Nice. Next. Last but this I think is coming to the conclusion. Hydrocarbon pneumonia is most important. Kerosene poisoning, very common in children. Children, it is of low viscosity, tends to cause aspiration. Child will present with pneumonia. You will have cough, high fever, and most of the hydrocarbons, they are toxic to CNS also. They may throw seizures, or they may become drowsy or comatose. Physical findings are minimal. If you take radiologically, you may find extensive consolidation. For these children, you have to avoid gastric lavage. Suppose just because it's poisoning, don't routinely do a lavage for these children. You should not do, because that increases the risk of aspiration. You have to give symptomatic treatment. Next slide. It's very common. Hydrocarbon pneumonia is very common in children. Remember that. Sometimes it may be asked as a short question for you. Next. You can see the consolidation here. Sometimes it may happen with tuberculosis also. Remember that. Next. Loeffler syndrome is due to worm infestation. Usually, larvae of the nematodes passing through the lungs, pulmonary capillaries, and there will be fever with chills and cough. X-ray film shows reticulonodular shadowing more often. It looks like reticulonodular shadowing. That is an important finding in the Loeffler syndrome. Diethyl carbamazine citrate or hetrazon can be used for this Loeffler syndrome. Next. Okay, next slide. So remember, all of you should be familiar with ARI, Acute Respiratory Infection Control Program. Here, objective is to identify the respiratory morbidity at the community level by a health worker even. Therefore, they go by most important sensitive indicator, that is respiratory rate. LRT is important cause of mortality. Therefore, these children need to be picked up in the society by the health worker. You must know how to control. Most of them are, remember, they are bacterial. Nearly 50 to 60%. They can be treated with antimicrobials. Hip and pneumococcal are the common pathogens. Staphylococcal is also there. Hip and pneumococcal can be prevented by vaccine. For staphylococcal, they need to be identified early. So at the community level, the pneumonia should be made a diagnosis with the help of rapid respiration. So I told you about the cutoff rates, age-related cutoffs. All of you, will ask you in orals also, what is the age-related cutoff for respiratory infections? So I have given here more than 60 for newborns and up to the age of 2 months, more than 50 breaths per minute in up to 1 year, up between 1 to 5 years, it is about more than 40. And they say between 5 to 10 years is more than 30 is tachypnea. Difficulty in respiration means indrawing will be there. Severe, suppose if indrawing is there, that is called difficulty in respiration. That indicates usually severe pneumonia. Once the child has got chest indrawing, there is a grunting and there is a tachypnea and child is febrile, that child must be treated as inpatient. You cannot ask the patient to go home giving some antimicrobials, right? So you have to give, if there is a sinus and feeding difficulty, that usually signify a very serious illness with complications. And that child requires hospitalization and intravenous antibiotics, especially a penicillin and aminoglycoside. Next. So any slide unnai Ramesh Reddy garu inka? Ramesh Reddy garu, how many slides are there?